Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlocked Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson. We're going to be with you today for about 30 to 45 minutes today. I have got the amazing Gabe Arnold with me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and why you should actually hang around. As you know, on The Unlocked Show, we talk about all things when it comes to business, family, and life. And over the last few months, we've been talking a lot about content, how to create it, why it's so important, how you can create impact and influence in your respective space. And I actually asked Gabe to come. I'm seeing Dave come up in the comments over here. Somebody's saying, hello, Dave. So I've asked Gabe to actually come on the show because he and his team have been creating content for loads and loads, thousands of different companies worldwide. He's got a team of over 50 remote workers all over the world, and they help their clients create perfect copy. So not only is he a copywriter, but he's also got, very successful businessman. He's very skilled when it comes to design. And he also has this process called the OmniSocial Engine, which is really similar to the type of, we have a project called the Omni Content Formula. So it fits really, really nicely in alignment with what we do. So I asked Gabe to come on board. Let us talk about content and how you can create it, why it's so important, and why it's super important in this, I suppose, in this day and age to be making sure that we're on top of our copy. So welcome to the show, Gabe. It is awesome to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Tracy. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. And just to let you know, I'm on the Gold Coast of Australia, and today for some reason it is like sweltering hot. So I have had to turn the air conditioner on, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to melt through today's session. So, bear with me if I start sort of dripping on the floor. You'll know exactly why that is, because it's, summer is a coming. So yeah. Let's get into this. Let's start talking about content. Let's tell me firstly, what's your backstory? Where did you come from? Why are you doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I, ever since I was really young, I was actually writing about this the other day. When I was 8 or 9 years old, somebody gave us an old Apple II, which was my first computer that got put in front of me. And I was super, super into that, played all the games, figured it out back when it had floppy disks and all that kind of fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's really when I think I started to get into technology. And then when as I got a little bit older, in my 10, 11, 12, 13, I started getting into chat rooms on ICQ. If anybody remembers what that is, and then AOL, of course, and built my first website on GeoCities, built and sold my first website at 16 on Yahoo Site Builder. Again, all these old platforms, and I sold that for $3,000 when I was 16. And I said, man, this tech and marketing stuff, may take off or may stick. And from there, I grew up in a family that had a construction company. So my grandfather taught me construction, remodeling, masonry, the contracting business. And so when I started doing that, I started doing work on the side. Then I ended up building a full construction company that in my early 20s, we were doing millions of dollars a year. And I did that all through online marketing and lead generation and pay-per-click and everything like that. And during that period, I was kind of in the background starting to do some more writing and practicing that end of things, because I couldn't read or write until the second grade, almost the beginning of the third grade year for me. And I just wasn't academic and super struggle with that. But once I got the hang of it, I started journaling and writing and really getting into that. And so that was kind of going on in the background, and I wasn't very good at it by any means, but I was practicing and trying a lot. And so I had my construction company for a few years. And then in 2007, here in the States, we had a big housing market crash. And so I lost that business because I got stuck for $250,000. Some of my customers' credit lines dried up for projects, got stuck for $250,000. I ended up going bankrupt about 90 days after I got stuck for the money. My best friend died. My grandfather died shortly after I got divorced. Lost my entire community of friends and family. And it was it was at that point that I was like, all right, what do I do? I had, very little to my name. I only had a few $1,000s to live on for an indefinite period of time. At that point, I wasn't sure how long I'd have to make that last. And I realized, all right, well, how did I build this business? Like, what was I good at? And I was good at the marketing and I was good at sales. And so it was that point that I said, well, I'm going to shift into the tech and marketing end of things. And I, at that point, this is ages ago now, but I learned Flash programming and ended up building some websites there, and started a couple businesses that didn't really work, but then ultimately landed on building what is today our parent company, which is Business Marketing Engine, that has a bunch of different products, including Copywriter Today. And when I was building that business, because I started it in 2007 when I realized that I wasn't, that I'd lost everything else. I needed to pivot into something else. I got a couple 9-to-5s and jumped into that. But I ended up building over the course of like 3 or 4 years, 1,000 websites myself, design, development, front to back, the whole thing. And I could go back in, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, and I would look and see that there was still that our blog is coming soon page. And I just realized that as much as people really wanted to get their message out there and share what they did, they didn't know how to market it. They didn't know how to write content. They didn't know how to get their message out there. And so in 2014, I heard a not a blog post. I heard a podcast by Dan Norris. And he talked about how he started a subscription website support company. And I was like, I think I could do that for content. And so that night, as most of my ideas go, I built and launched Copywriter Today, which if any of you are super nerdy and know what the web archive is, you can go back and look at it and see how horrifically ugly it was. But I launched Copywriter Today as a subscription content service. And it was, at that time, I believe it was one of the first, if not the first, subscription content services out there. Now there's a lot of them out there, obviously. But I built that, and we started writing blog posts, writing content, writing ebooks for clients. And it really changed things for me, because it was the first reoccurring revenues, model that I had. And for entrepreneurs, reoccurring revenue is the holy grail, in my opinion, of everything that you should be focused on in a lot of senses. And then it's really changed the game for a lot of entrepreneurs. At this point, we've written over 50 million words for clients around the world. And it's been an amazing experience, because I realized that, there's a lot of people like me that either young or now don't have the time or interest to, write their own content, yet they really need to consistently get their message out in front of, their prospects and clients. Because if you don't show up consistently, then you don't exist. I mean, to your prospects, unfortunately. And so it's just been really exciting to, create content that really moves the needle for people, because it's that branding, it's that ongoing communication. It's continually letting people know, here's what we offer and here's what we do. And then when the time is right, people raise their hand. And this happens to me all the time. And I never take it for granted, because it's just something really amazing and special. And at the same time, it happens so frequently now that it's normal, if that makes sense. But I'll have people get on a call with me and be like, oh yeah, I know you, Gabe. I know what you do. I know what you're about. And like, I want to sign up. I'm ready to go. And I'm like, okay, as an example, we're working on a big project with a client who's partnered with the UN. And he's like, oh yeah, we talked like a few years ago, and I follow all your stuff, and like, here's what I want to do. And this is about what you cost, budget wise. And I was like, yep. He's like, so let's get started. It's like, okay. So when you really invest in having a continual positive conversation with your audience, everything works better, and it's easier to sell. It's easier to pivot and move. It's easier to launch something, because you have an audience that knows who you are and what you're about. So that was just a huge, realization for me, of like, wow, people need this content. It can be done in an easy and methodical, and in a lot of senses, automated way. And then it can make a huge impact for their business and for my business. And so that's the super short version of how we got here.
And I absolutely love hearing stories like this, Gabe, because, in the situation that we're in right now, there are a lot of people that are, hitting rock or have hit rock bottom and are wondering, what can I do? How can I pull myself out of this? What options have I got? And today we have the things like the internet, digital assets, and creating things almost out of nothing overnight just by listening. And I think the thing that I loved about the story that you just told here about, your background is hitting that rock bottom, but then having that epiphany of, hey, I could do this. Hey, there's a gap in the market here, and actually taking action and implementing something. And now today, 50 million words later, and a lot of, really happy customers where you've allowed people to remove that barrier, like you was talking about, allowing people to be able to find you without having to be hard sell. They're actually selling themselves before they even get to you, which is great. And the other thing that I also want to touch on a little bit later, because we haven't gone down this path in any of our shows yet, but is that recurring passive income. So at some point we'll circle back to that, because I think when you said that, everybody's ears would have pricked up and gone, I want that, the Holy Grail. How do I do that with, even thinking about some of the things that they're doing in their business. So let's get down to like, content. So a lot of people, they understand that they need to create content. Tell us about, why is it that you've gone down the path of, I suppose, the content in the written form, because that's a lot of what your company does, is like that written format, blogging, etc. Why is that so important?
I remember sitting down with Russell Brunson, I think the same ClickFunnels that you and I met, if I remember correctly. I think so. I was sitting at the table with him and I said, Russell, I'm like, is video going to eat content, written content? Because I always want to hear what somebody that's a little farther down the road than me can, has perspective wise. And he said, Gabe, video is going to continue to emerge. Obviously, we're on this platform that we didn't have back then, when you and I met a few years ago there. But he said, video is continue to grow, but written word is never going to go anywhere. He said they're going to equalize, if anything, of like, you're going to need really strong copy, really good content going out there, and video is going to be another channel to have the conversation. And for me, I think that there's different touch points with your audience, and you have to be aware that none of them are the end all be all. So just being really honest, and I'm on video here, and this is a powerful format. If you solely rely on video, then you're leaving a huge chunk of money on the table and you're not serving some of your audience. If you solely relied on written content, same thing, you would end up missing out and doing video. And we could look at different channels, but those are two major ones, right? And so with written content, what I've realized is that usually I like to connect with a prospect on any channel, however they want to do that. Like, there's so many ways we can reach them. And then when it comes time to have a deeper conversation, then it's wise to send them written information, because when you start to have a deeper conversation with your prospect, you will filter out the people that are tire kickers, or that only have a short time to watch something, or aren't always, aren't willing to dig in. Now, obviously, there's always the exceptions of those folks that are purely auditory and visual learners and don't read, and that's totally fine. I'm not saying, because there are certain things that I prefer to consume that way. What I will say, though, is that for the majority of the audience that you serve, especially really in B2B and B2C, if you're going straight to the consumer, you're going to other businesses who are your clients. When you can start to have a conversation via the written word, whether that's email, a blog post, on a sales page, a long form post in your Facebook group, whatever that is, you're going to really get to a higher level of conversation with them, and you'll have a more sophisticated conversation. And so and also the nice thing about the written word is that you when we're reading something, we can reread a section if we didn't get it, or we can reread it to fully absorb or digest it. And so in this conversation, everybody will end up gaining a lot of information. And if they want to re-listen to it, they get to, which is great about all the places that you're broadcasting this video. The same thing is in the written word. And the difference sometimes is that when you send out an email that really impacts somebody, I have people say, I'm saving this email. I'm going to read it again next year. So they'll put it in a folder and they'll read it again. And so I think it's just a different channel that is really important to understand, that when you want to deepen the conversation with your prospect, I would advise you to at least make available to them doing it in writing. Even like I listened to a podcast from my friend Alex Charfin today, and I listened to the podcast and it was great. I love listening to his stuff. I think he's a brilliant entrepreneur. And then I was like, man, it's great there's a transcript on here, because I wanted to reread what he said to absorb it in a different way. And so I think that that's something that we just have to be wise as entrepreneurs, as business owners, even as just the managers and leaders in different businesses, is that if we want to fully impact our audience, we can't rely on a single channel, because then we're either only touching part of the audience or part of our audience's brain. And if we start to do it in multi-channel, then we get to surround them with love and support and service. And that's when I believe you're truly serving your audience at the highest level.
Yeah, perfect. As far as like creating content, what do you recommend people lead with? Like, there's lots of various different, I suppose, modes of communication: the written format, the video format, audio with podcasts, etc. In your opinion, which do you prefer to lead with, and why?
So I think the first thing to start with, and I'll answer your question directly here in a second, but I think the first thing to start with is, as the leader in your organization, whatever your role is, wherever you're there to lead, I think the first key is to sit back and really take some time to reflect and take notes, and just get in a quiet place and say, okay, if I think back about the big transformations that I've seen a client have, what were those moments and why? So if you go back and say, okay, man, they really had that big aha moment when they realized that they needed to have an SOP for this role that they're filling. Or it was a big aha moment when they realized that they needed to, chunk down something that they were delivering into smaller bites. Or I'm thinking of my own examples. But if you think about those spotlight moments for you and your client, write those down first and say, okay, one, these were just amazing moments of transformation for my client where I really served them. And what were those around? And when was I like really proud to be an entrepreneur and really proud to be that leader, in the business or whatever, however you're serving your audience. And those are the first things that I like to see people write down and think about, because those are like the pinnacle moments that you need to communicate to your audience. And they need to know, as clients or as prospects, like, here's what it's like to work with us, and here are the important things that you need to connect with if you want to have a transformation. And I start there because we have amazingly talented writers. You have brilliant people like Tracy that you guys have access to here in the community. You have amazing, resources. However, as the leader, you have to first know the strategy. And so if you go to somebody and say, write me content, then you're going to get, at best, average content. And it doesn't matter. You could hire the world's greatest copywriters. But if you sit down and say, here's how we move the needle for our clients, and you identify those, those kind of transformational moments, then you can start to build a strategy around that. So let's say, for sake of example, that you offer a service where you can help people transform their credit so that they can buy the home they want, or they can get, loans or credit for their business or something like that. If that's the transformational thing that you're doing to move their business forward, then you want to set that up as like the pillar post, the pillar content that you need to promote all the time. And once you know, like, man, this is how we serve our audience, this is how we really get transformations from them, then you have the big goal. And that's the first thing you need to understand. Once you understand that, and this is really how we serve our audience, then you can layer under that and say, well, since we know that if people realize these three things about their credit, business, and personal, I'm just making this example up, then I can say, okay, I need to build an email series that explains that. I need to have a series of blog posts that talks about the components of that and points maybe to a master ebook or guide that we write. And out of that, once I write a blog post, I can go to my video team and say, hey, let's make a video about this topic that can be in the content or on YouTube that links to the article. Once we set that anchor point, then we can build a strategy under it. And you can, have our team, your copywriters, whoever you bring onto your team, you can then say, here's the strategy. Because what I think sometimes is missed is that as the leader in your business and whatever role you hold, you have to lead. So you have to say, like, you have to lead in all areas. You don't have to be a great writer. You don't have to be good at video. You don't have to be good at all these channels, but you do have to say, here's the transformational thing I'm trying to share from my experience. And so let's make that the primary point, or maybe there's 3 or 5 primary points. And then what are all the little pieces that will get somebody there? And then you can plug in video, written content, all the different things that need to be there to support it.
Yeah, you then go back to, well, what's the vehicle and what's the method that I'm going to create this on?
Exactly.
And then moving to kind of that whole Omni situation of then taking that one anchor piece of content and turning it into multiple pieces of material that you can post, all over the place.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about creating this plan. So when you're wanting to create impact and make a real difference in the world, like you've sort of alluded to this as far as, you being the leader of the business, you need to set the tone, you need to set the path and the direction so that your team are actually heading in the right direction. As far as like putting together the plan, do you have like a process of doing that as far as come up with your, I suppose, your pillars and then the content that sits underneath that? Is there any particular type of content that you see being the most effective in terms of getting people to have that transformation?
To me, I think it's like the ongoing conversation that connects them to you, to have the direct connect to your service or you, that creates this transformation. So there is content that's transformational. I mean, I started Copywriter Today from that podcast I listened to. So that was super transformational for me. I know the Foundation podcast with Dane Maxwell is where I heard that, and Dan Norris is on it. It was really interesting this year. I got to meet Dane on a mastermind call, and I was like, hey, you helped me create $1 million business. And he was like, wow, man, that's amazing. And so he had no idea. And like, I didn't realize that we were in this mastermind together till this year. And like, I had reached out and he was busy and it was fine, but we never connected. And so my simple answer is that you never know what touch point is going to be the transformational moment for somebody, of where they're going to pick up the phone and do business with you, or where they're going to take action on something that they know they should have done, but it just finally made sense. And so I believe it's our job, as the leaders in the business, to continually provide high value content and the information about what we're doing, because obviously, like the kind of standard things that we've all heard, it takes people multiple times for something to stick, right? So 7 to 10 times minimum. I think in reality, I think that's maybe a little bit of an old model. I think if we look at today's model, it might be 30 to 50 times that we have to see something until we go, oh, that's what that means. Because there's just there's a higher level of noise in our world, and that's okay. So I'm not always sure what the transformational piece of content is going to be, but what I can tell you is that if you're consistent, you will beat everybody, because it's a simple thing, but people always ask me, like, what's the secret to success? And I'm like, persistence. That's it.
Yeah. Just keep going. I mean, often it's a game of those who can survive. It's a game of survival. If you can hang around and you can just stick at it long enough, before long, a lot of your competitors will just fall off. They just fall off their bikes and they don't get back up. So yeah, I totally agree with you. You just got to keep going. But beyond that, it's like actually just stepping up. Taking a step, being prepared to take a stand for something, stepping up and being prepared to actually speak, whether that be, literally speaking like this, or speaking in blog format or email format, written, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's step number one, and then just keep going. I want to talk about, I know that you've kind of spoken about this too a fair bit in our conversation here, but it's email. And, people are either scared of that, don't enjoy doing it. Can we help some people in like what sort of things because there's also, different types of email, sequences that you can send out. How do you go about like helping somebody create the right type of email sequences What should they create? What should be the first one that they do? And how do they just keep going with that?
Yeah. So the first thing when it comes to email, and I'm sure we'll get this and not be surprised, but I really want you to take a minute and think about what I'm about to say. So if you're a leader in your business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a manager, whatever role you have, odds are you get a lot of email. So I don't know how much email you get, Tracy, but I get about 500 emails a day. And I use software and my assistant to manage it at this point. And I'm always trying to deal with that. The first thing you need to realize is that your prospects do not get anywhere near the amount of email that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super important to realize, because I hear way too many entrepreneurs say, man, I don't want to be another person spamming, somebody. And you got to realize that the noise level for everybody else is not the same as you. And I haven't looked at the stats recently, but entrepreneurs get probably 10 times the email that everybody else does, because we're signing up for stuff. We want to learn something. We got a team, and like we're information hoarders, right? I love it. But the first thing you need to realize is that you need to just set aside that you're not going to be bothering people. And good news is they can unsubscribe as soon as they're done listening to you. And that's okay too. I'm always happy when people unsubscribe off my list. So if you start with those first two mindset pieces of, one, your prospects do not get as much email as you, and two, when people unsubscribe, you should be super happy. And if you can get those two things down, then we can move on to what I'll tell you here next of what you should send. So what you should send are essentially two simple kinds of email. One is just conversational updates. Here's what I'm up to, building a relationship. And so what I do is, a majority of my email content is just what I'm working on in my business, or leadership tips I've learned, or things I'm working on, or, I had this experience today. Has this ever happened to you? Because you really just are building a relationship with your audience. And so softer, just conversational relationship building content is huge, because if you start that way, then people will look forward to reading your emails, and it will be a one-to-one conversation. And the other thing that you should put in there is like, write me back. What do you think about this? Or what questions you have? Or have you ever tried this? Like, ask them very clearly a few times in the emails, like, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, and really make it a two-way conversation and not a blast. Emails should never be an email blast. Just like it should never be that way from your mindset. The other thing that I want to share is that I have friends who have lists of 2,500 names, not really a huge list, right? That make millions of dollars on that list. And so if you have some false belief that you need to have millions of names on your list, which if you do, great. And there's plenty of things we can do there, but you can make a lot of money, you can serve your audience, and you can really be successful by just having a small list and having a conversation with them. So definitely the first part is, make it a two-way conversation. And then also, then periodically, strategically plan and say, hey, I'm launching this webinar into the end of the month. And so here's what we're going to talk about. And then in a launch week, I typically send a couple emails a week usually. You definitely want to be consistent what you do. So if you can consistently do one email a week, great. Then start with that. Then build from there. I typically send 2 a week. On occasion, I miss. Today's one of those days where I totally missed. I had something set up and it didn't happen. And so I will send probably one this week. But generally, I try to set what I can do and stay consistent with it. When you're doing a launch or you're pushing something, or you really want people to sign up or buy something, then you can be more aggressive that week. And there's a bunch of segmentation things and some detailed stuff that we can get into later if need be. But you can then just make the offer and say, hey, end of this week, we're holding this webinar. I'd love to have you register. We're going to teach you, how to do X, Y, Z. Or if you have a physical store, you can say, hey, we have a special, this weekend, come in, show us this email, we'll give you this. Like, you can do promotion if you've built a relationship. Just like you can't, you can't walk up, you can't be walking in public, I've never met somebody, and walk up and ask them to buy something. You can, but it's ineffective compared to if you build a following that's, you interact with all the time, and then you make an offer, they'll happily, engage with you. So first start with conversational, and then strategically plan doing an offer a couple times a month is plenty. And once you mastered that, there's a ton of more advanced things you can do, but start with the basics.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the thing that also was hidden in there was making sure that you have the conversation with one person. And this is often something that I see that people get tripped up on, is that they're sending out, hey guys, and just try to speak to, a broad range of people, when in fact it should be a very intimate conversation between you and the reader. And therefore you are speaking to, you want to have in your intention is to speak to one person.
Yeah. One thing I always tell people is either visualize that customer you love, like the perfect customer, and write to them. Or sometimes I tell people, imagine like a loved one, your kid, your cousin, whoever it is, and pretend that they're in the business and write to them. And if you write to them, you'll write with a lot of heart and a lot of intention. It'll be very personal when you go, like if I sat down and wrote and pretend I was just writing to Tracy today, then it would be very personal and direct, and it wouldn't be like just all this wide general language, because I would give her more specific advice because I care about her.
Yeah, that's great advice. So we've got a question come up here from Vicky, and she's asking, how often in a week should you actually email them?
Yeah, so the first thing is commit to something you can do consistently. And I'll answer your question in a minute here, Vicky, but commit to what you are going to do, because if you are confident that you can send a weekly email, then that's a great place to start. What I do tell people with email, because of the noise level that everybody has, is if you can't send a weekly email, you probably shouldn't do it. If you're going to do less, then I would do blog posts promoted other places, things like that. But at minimum, stick with, start with once a week. Then as you go, you can easily go to twice a week. You can go to daily emails, things like that. But you only want to send daily email to the people that open emails within the last 15 days. So there's some segmentation strategies and things you need to do there. But honestly, I wouldn't worry about that at all. If you haven't gotten into email marketing or, email conversations yet, I would first, say, I'm going to email once a week, stick to that for 3 months. And if you've got that nailed down, then you can introduce a second email. And after you do 2 emails a week, then I'd highly recommend you either learn a little bit more advanced segmentation, or you bring somebody in that can help that, because the more your emails get opened, the more they get opened. And I'll explain what I mean there. Email box providers like Microsoft, Gmail, Yahoo, there's still AOL boxes too, surprise, surprise. But all those providers, if they see that you send out 100 emails, and 20 of them get opened, then the next email you send, they're going to be like, man, this is a great sender because 20% of people open them. If you send an email to 1,000 people and only a handful of people open them, then they'll say, oh, not many people are interested in this, so we're going to downplay it. It's not going to get visibility in the inbox. So you always want to focus on open rates first as your first metric, which is why it is awesome if people unsubscribe, because if they don't want to hear from you, you don't want them on your list. And there's list cleanup, and there's a lot of strategies that go into that. But yeah, start with once a week and be super consistent and make the email personable and valuable. And then that's a great starting point.
The next question I often get is, what platform should I use for my emails? MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit. What do you recommend?
In my experience, I've used a lot of the majors, not all of them. And ActiveCampaign is hands down the best platform out there. I won't talk about the other ones, but because I don't like to say negative things, but I would stick with ActiveCampaign.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm a big fan of ActiveCampaign for all, I think, all the reasons that you would be too. So guys, ActiveCampaign, obviously you can go and just go to www.activecampaign, and it's a great tool that you can pretty much integrate with almost any other website or funnel building platform.
Yeah. And if anybody, one quick note on that, if anybody does end up using that or wants to get set up there, because I've been with them for 12 years, maybe longer, I have some access to stuff I can give people if they need help there. So just reach out, and there's some free stuff I can send your way there.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. Thank you, Gabe. Our community will love that. The other thing is, obviously we've talked a lot about the conversational style emails. What other type of communication? So blog posts, we know that they are we just have to get publishing, guys, whatever the platform is that you are of your choice, whether it's video, podcasting, or, the written format and blogs, just get onto it and start getting it done. But as far as like email, and I'm going down this path because I've had lots of questions about this of late. In fact, I was presenting in another group a couple of weeks ago, and they are on the mark with email, and they were just really trying to understand how does all this work, and how can we make this as best as we possibly can with their email strategy. So hence the reason I'm sort of delving and scratching a little bit deeper in this whole email space. And I know you're really, really good at it.
Thank you.
So what other kinds of emails would you recommend people send? Conversational?
Yeah. So I'll give you guys $2 million secrets that I learned from a lot of smart people that I follow around. One is what I said earlier, is to focus on your open rates. So make sure that you're sending to your most engaged segments the most, because that will increase your open rates. And the second thing, and I'll answer directly too, is that one of the most important things I believe that people need to pay attention to for the next 2 to 3 years is SMS marketing. Mm-hmm. And I'll tie that in and it'll make sense here. So one of the things that we're seeing is really, really successful is to offer something to people via SMS that they cannot get anywhere else. And so if you promote something in your email list or on a landing page or on social media, and we're actually testing something that right now I think may be only available in the US, which I'm not happy about on that front. But we're testing something where if you sign up through SMS, then we'll give you exclusive content that you can't get on our email list and you can't get other places, because then what you can do with your SMS marketing list is you can SMS your whole list and say, hey, I just sent an email that has something super exclusive in it. And then everybody will go open that email. So that's a way that you can cross your channels and promote them both. So just keep that in mind, because those are a couple things to really pay attention to, because open rates on SMS are 90% plus. And email open rates are dropping when you don't use it correctly. Nobody here has to have dropping email rates, but in general, it's not being used strategically. And so email rates are dropping. So the key with email is to really know your audience and send them exactly what they want. So one of the things that I would send immediately to your list, if you have one now and you haven't done this in a while, is send them a short 3 to 5 question survey and incentivize it somehow and say, hey, in the email, hey, Tracy, I always want to look at how I can serve my audience and help them. And you're in my online family because you're part of my email list. And so would you mind taking, 2 minutes to answer this short survey? And if you do, I'm going to give you this free bonus or this gift, or maybe even say for the first 10 people, I'm going to give an Amazon gift card, however you're going to incentivize it. Then ask them, what are you most stuck on right now? What do you really need help with? If I could connect you to one thing, what would it be? And there's some different questions there that you can put together. But ask your list, what do you need from me? And then when they tell you what they need, give that to them. It's pretty simple. Yeah. But if you start with that, then you're going to be able to really serve your audience with it exactly what you want. Because if you never ask the question and you just assume they want steak for dinner every night and they're vegetarians, they're not going to like you, right? They're going to eventually just unsubscribe and go away. And so one of the best things you can do is just a survey email and say, you can send it as a form with a few questions. You can send a very short email that says, what's one thing that if you had more of it would change your business? Reply back and tell me. It doesn't even have to be a form. And so that's the first thing I always encourage people to do is survey your audience, ask them what they need, because then you can actually deliver what they need instead of just making it up and thinking you know everything. So
yeah. I mean, I can remember that, and I think it might have even been Russell Brunson that was talking about it, is give people what they need. Give the people what they want, not what they need. So, yeah, I mean, that mindset shift just in itself, and you're making sure that, you're asking people what is it that they actually want, serving them what they want, they're then more likely to buy from you what they actually need down the track. Yeah, I love this. But that whole combination of utilizing SMS marketing along with your email marketing and making them some exclusive offers to make
Yep.
it enticing enough that people will want to then read your email. What about something that I'm seeing, and I don't know if this is fairly widespread, but the likes of like messenger bots. So that there was that whole sort of surge of utilizing a messenger bot for the same purposes. Are you seeing a major, like, I suppose, shift from that Facebook Messenger to now SMS marketing?
So when you do Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or SMS, I am, in my opinion, very hesitant to write bots. And the SMS marketing I'm talking about is not bots. It should be you writing to your audience. And there are very skilled bot programmers and copywriters who, with very good market research about your audience, can build you an amazing bot. But we're still smarter than the bots, and that's going to be that way for a decade. I think in a decade it might be different, but for now, people know when it's a bot. And so now they don't know if you have done extensive market research, which is dozens or hundreds of conversations with your ideal client, your ideal client avatar. And every single time I get on the phone with somebody and you say, what's your biggest problem? They say X. If you know that, you can build an amazing bot that will serve a lot of that. But none of us, in my opinion anyway, I could be totally wrong, none of us wake up in the morning and go, man, I cannot wait to talk to a bot today. So it hasn't. Now again, in reality, in 10 years, that may be the case. We may be talking to bots who are therapists and doctors and whatever. That's great. That's not the world we live in today. And even those bots will be heavily influenced by real people. And so I did wake up today. I was like, man, I'm super excited to come hang out with Tracy and all of you guys in the community. And I was looking forward to talk to a person. And so what I will say is that you can use Messenger, you can use SMS, you can use all these tools, but it really needs to be personal. It really needs to be, targeted to your audience. And so if you're going to use the other tools to drive people into email, make it really personal, make it from you. You can schedule those messages, but they need to be timely and appropriate, and they need to be really from the heart. And just like we said earlier, write it as if you're writing to a single member of your audience, or like sometimes I'll write pretending my son's, 10, 15 years down the road owning a business. He's not quite there yet. He's almost 9, so he's not there yet. But when I'm writing like that, it's really heartfelt. And the example I always give people is, if you've ever had a friend or partner or whoever send you a text and it says, okay, you know if they're mad or if everything's fine. And there's two letters there. So there is a lot more weight behind the words than just the words. And there's a lot of energy, and there's, I won't go super woo on everybody, but there's a lot more behind words than just letters. And so your audience can tell. And so you can plan your content out. Like sometimes I'll schedule my emails out for a week or two, on occasion a month, but I'm really thinking about my audience every time I'm writing them. I'm really thinking about where they may be and where I'm leading them email after email.
Yeah, I think that the theme here is it's about being personal. It's about it being having a conversation with people. And like you're saying, we want to get up, we want to have a conversation with a person that's two way. That is a conversation, not just a blast of one-sided information. And just making sure that we do it on we have them on a regular basis. Make it very, very consistent, personal, so that people are excited to want to speak with you.
Yeah. And the only exception for me, like when we talk about bots or auto replies or things like that, is there are times that people would rather just get the answer. So if on your messenger bot or your SMS bot or whatever you're using, or auto reply, if somebody just says like, what are your hours today? You can have a bot reply that says we're open 9 to 5. And I don't want to talk to somebody. I'm just looking for information, and that's perfect. But if I need to know something specific or about my order, or like, can you customize this? I was going through a chatbot the other day for support, and I just kept putting in operator, just like you do on the phone when you used to hit 0 or whatever for us here. But it's like, there absolutely are efficiencies to AI, and those can be leveraged, but use them intelligently. Don't think that you can get out of building a relationship with your audience.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So, I mean, there's some real gems of advice throughout today's conversation. So before we wrap up today, I know that you've got some stuff that you'd like to give away, and I'm going to put it up on the screen right now, guys. So part of Gabe's business, Copywriter Today, he actually offers, you can have your very first free service by Gabe and his team. So I'm going to put on here. He's very kindly given us a link that we can give to you guys, and you'll be able to go there and actually utilize his services for free. So let me grab it. Let me pop it up. There you go. Should be on the bottom of the screen right now. So go to copywritertoday.net. And if you want to give Gabe and his team, take them for a bit of a spin and get your first free article, you're welcome to do so. Feel free to add anything to that, Gabe.
Yeah. So what we always want people to be able to try it out before they commit to using us. And so just like I said before, have a clear idea of what you think your audience needs to hear from you. Because if you're not clear, we can try as hard as we can, but we won't get anywhere. But if you just sit down and say, okay, if my audience had a clear description about this service that we have, or this is how we work with them, and you give us a bunch of details, then we're able to write that for us. And so you're able to go, grab a free article, see how our service works, see if it's a great fit. Because like I said, we have a very affordable monthly subscription. We can write blog posts for you that, that can go up consistently. And then you're having that consistent conversation with your audience. We can also, write some email content for you. Next year, we have a very specific email product inside of Copywriter Today coming out as well. But if hey, we want to, write a few emails that explain, here's our services, here's how we work, this is the best way to connect with us. Those are great things to do. So yeah, we would love to, if you guys need content and want to give a try, you can go there, and then you'll actually meet with one of our team members. They'll go through everything. And as long as it's a good fit on both sides, they'll say, yep, we'll write the sample for you and show you how it works.
Beautiful. Well, look, I want to say thank you so much for being with us today, because you've given loads and loads of valuable information. There's, even the things as far as what type of emails should you send, how often you should send them. And I think one of the key things that have come out of this is just keep going, keep going, don't give up. Start, and you have to start somewhere, and it doesn't matter. Like Gabe was saying, if we go back and have a look in his archives and you look in mine, you'll probably find some pretty scary stuff back there. But you have to start somewhere, and before long, you keep going, and your stuff gets better and better and better. But if you want to get a bit of a head start, obviously you hire somebody like Gabe and his team, and they will help you navigate all of that without having to do all of the scary stuff in the beginning. So thanks so much for being with us, Gabe. I really appreciate your time and your friendship over the last number of years, because you and I have connected on a number of occasions and spoken business. And hopefully I'll get to be over there in the States sometime soon, and we'll get to catch up again. Yeah,
thank you so much for having me. This is a blast. And I know there's a bunch of comments and stuff, and I'll definitely get back to everybody on those as well.
That'd be wonderful. If you could, for those of you who are already in the Success Secrets for Business, Family and Life, Gabe's going to make sure that he jumps back into the group and he'll answer any questions that you guys have got. So make sure that you get in there and you post your comments, because he will answer them. For those of you who are watching elsewhere and who are not currently part of our community inside of the Success Secrets for Business, Family and Life, go look us up, go check us out, and come and be part of the community there. We've got over 2,000 people inside of that group. We run multiple shows on a daily basis. So not only will you get to have exposure to the Unlock show, but you'll also get to join in with some of the other conversations on some of the other shows too, which are all about helping you thrive across your business, your family, and your life. And if you're listening to the podcast right now, thanks very much for joining and downloading the podcast. We are getting some traction over there with the podcast itself. And if you're finding that these episodes are valuable to you, please make sure that you share them with your friends and invite them to either the Facebook community or share the podcast with them, so that they can also join in on the conversations and start implementing these things in their business too. Because the last thing we want you to do is just be listening. We actually want you to make sure you go away and you implement the stuff that you learn. So thanks very much for joining me today. I'm going to be back again on Friday with another episode of The Unlock Show. I'm Tracy Wilson, and it's always my pleasure to be here. See you guys again on Friday. Bye for now. Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.